It is that time to review the top 16 for the last Mox Masters before the Mox Masters Invitational. Welcome everybody, welcome back to Comedian MTG. My name is Ian. We are reviewing the top 16 for, as I mentioned, Mox Masters September 2023. We're going to be breaking down the top 16 lists from this tournament and talking about, some interesting stuff. I have to say, this is an extremely spicy top 16. There are a lot of atypical lists here, and I'm genuinely thrilled to be able to break them down. Before we get into this top 16, I'll remind you, while you're here on YouTube, please hit that like button, that subscribe button, helps out the channel a ton. And if you go on over to patreon.com/comedianmtg, any support over there helps a ton. We also, the reason I'm able to keep this channel going is by doing coaching full time. So if you're interested in cEDH coaching, interested in making these top tables and being on one of these videos, you're interested in a little help from that, check it out. Email me at comedianmtg@gmail.com. Find me on Twitter, Discord, message me on any of those places. And we are also announcing a new type of coaching. And if you're interested in that, definitely hit me up. We'll be talking about that a little further into the video. Without any further ado, let's break down this top 16. Our first list here is Fool's Gold by Sharky. This is a pretty classic performance by Sharky here. Coming at the bottom, top 16, we have this Tevesh Krom list, which is basically all that our Tevesh Krom player plays. But yeah, this is, the classic mid-range Tevesh Krom list that we've come to know from Sharky. This list is definitely a little bit more grindy than something like Rogside, but definitely not as grindy as a deck like Blue Farm. This list, relying on Tevesh for some of these synergies here with Displacer Kitten and being an outlet for actually infinite mana with Hullbreaker Horror. And then apart from that, it's doing a lot of the classic, Grixis stuff, right? You are trying to accelerate stuff out really, really quickly, win with an ad nauseum, turning that into an Underworld Breach. This one, using Necropotence lines, as it's one of the quicker decks in the format. A lot of these Grixis decks have gotten a big upgrade by now they have Born Upon the Wind along with Final Fortune. So now these Necropotence, use Necro for 25 or 30. These lines are becoming more and more viable as time goes on, which is really, really strong, and it's able to really capitalize on, Necro being a very strong card as it is, but now that we have this redundancy of effects that can really capitalize on that type of Necro effect, you're definitely seeing decks more and more start to lean into really utilizing these effects for the maximum capacity. The other new card from the set is Beseech the Mirror, which is the actual new card from Wilds of Eldraine, which a lot of these more aggressively slanted decks are going to be playing. Beseech is really, really strong, and Tevesh is one of the commanders that can really take advantage of it. I feel like Malcolm and Tivit got a lot of the conversation about decks that are good with Beseech the Mirror, but obviously Tevesh making tokens super easy to throw one of those away so that you can put a Breach Run into the battlefield or something broken like that. So yeah, Beseech being very strong here, and probably will be seen play in a lot of the Grixis core just going forward. I think this card sort of puts the last nail in the coffin of people playing Grim Tutor. We have cEDH Tymna Halana Turbo Hulk by Jimmy's 17. Now this is the first time that basically someone who isn't Gustav has come here with this Tymna Halana list in a long time, and it's a pretty classic Turbo Hulk deck, right? We're trying to get Protean Hulk onto the battlefield, sacrifice it pretty early, and then start the Hulk chain going. None of the lists I've noticed lately that are on this Hulk package are playing the new Samwise Cauldron combo, which I thought was one of the main reasons to be playing these piles nowadays, but it seems like a lot of these pilots are just not committing to that combo, which is very interesting to me. This list definitely has some spicier cards, playing Boon Weaver Giant to be able to go grab our Pattern of Rebirth. Definitely some early, 2016 cEDH tech that is now coming back in this list, but it's just redundancy for Protean Hulk if that something ever happens to your Hulk or something like that. I guess technically speaking, it doesn't actually fix anything with the Hulk, right? Because Protean Hulk will be gone, right? So if Protean Hulk is gone, it doesn't really matter that much with Pattern. But the idea for this deck definitely is that we get these combos where you can get Protean Hulk on the battlefield, sacrifice it pretty early. You have Halana sort of board control for a lot of the stacks of your games, right? It can really snipe down something like a Dranith or another effect that is really shutting down your creature combos. And then you can also use its ability to be able to have Protean Hulk deal its own power to itself and then go from there. Oof and Douthie and a couple of the tempo pieces here kind of lock your opponents out and give you enough time so that you can turn the game around the corner. And I noticed that some lists nowadays with Protean Hulk will be playing a few Rule of Law effects, but not fully committing to the Rule of Law plan, which is really interesting. It's great for tempo in a sense, right? And we're definitely not at the place in the meta where just playing an Archon of a Myriad doesn't, make you strictly lose to a Winota, because that deck's not really seeing play anymore. So I think a lot of these more value-centric rule of law effects might start seeing a little bit more play now that Winota's sort of been driven out of the format by the play patterns that we've been seeing. So it's really interesting stuff. Apart from that, definitely not a lot of new tech. Bowmasters is probably like the newest card added to the list, but good to see this list still kicking it. You know, it's a deck that is still very viable and still able to do its thing. And I do kind of love Protean Hulk still, you know, retaining its status in the format as a competitive combo. So congrats to our pilot here. We have Soap here with Mob Nixilis. We got our Ob Nixilis Captive Kingpin. First thing I'm noticing here is this Ob Nixilis, which I don't think I've ever seen in a competitive list, but whenever an opponent draws a card, it deals 1 damage to that player. So that's already starting out pretty funny. You know, just in effect, it's basically a Cataract Parasite, but it doesn't require you to have another card on the battlefield. Definitely not one that I'm used to seeing in a lot of these Ob lists, but it's pretty spicy. A part of me wonders, just because this was the art chosen, if this is like a player who has this specific version of this card and is like, I'm going to play it in my cEDH deck, but I don't know. It's still pretty decent. But yeah, Ob is one of those lists that like, ooh, Soot Imp, that's a new one. Whenever a player plays a non-back spell, that player loses 1 life. I have never seen this one before. That's pretty spicy. As I was saying, Ob is one of those decks now that like, I think it's going to keep showing up at tournaments. It's started to like do decently, but it hasn't like made a top 16 basically since the first weekend it was out. So it's good to see the list back and kind of like doing its thing. It's definitely like a deck that I think is going to wax and wane. People are going to kind of forget about it and then be like, oh right, this does draw like 20 cards when you play against it. But the deck's pretty solid. It definitely needs its commander to do its thing. Otherwise you're playing definitely a bunch of cards that are like not fantastic, like Cataract Parasite, Immolation Shaman. Cards like that are not good without your commander. But when your commander's out, the engine becomes like insane, right? Like anytime that someone activates a Thrasios or does something that's not a mana ability, like boom, great, I draw a card. Or every time your opponents draw, you draw a card, right? So Ob is definitely extremely strong. And yes, I'm aware it's not actual card draw. It is exile from the top of your library and make Ob bigger, but like stuff adds up. And then the rest of the deck, you can sort of do like the Rakdos, put the foot on the gas pedal stuff, right? This one also playing Beseech, although kind of surprised with this deck, there's a lot less things to just kind of throw away, but I'm seeing like a lot of incidental tokens here, like blood tokens, treasures, things like that. So I can definitely see how Beseech can still be totally worth your time here. And then the deck also relies on things like Ad Nauseam and stuff like that, which is kind of wild because it's on Citadel, Ad Naus, Necro, right? With Snuff Out being 4 life thrown away, Dismember most of the time 4 life thrown away, Fire Covenant fully just diving into the life total. So it's definitely not a Turbo Nas deck by any means, right? But definitely has a decent amount of things in the list that require you to pay a lot of life. So if you put pressure on the life total of this deck, it definitely can slow it down for certain aspects. Also funniest thing that Grim Tutor's basically dead, but we see it here in this alongside Beseech the Mirror is kind of funny. We have Tremneck's Blue Farm. They're playing Blue Farm. This is the list that Tremneck has been piloting for quite some time. They are a prolific Blue Farm pilot, just able to do their thing. Once again, Born Upon the Wind, new addition to the list, but apart from that, this is pretty classic Blue Farm, down to 13 artifacts. And, you know, not afraid to run a Moxable with 13 artifacts, which is so brazen to me. Like, I get that it's a great post Ad Nauseam, but my god, that card is dead in so many hands, I can imagine. It's so funny to me. But yeah, One Ring being a new addition to the deck, I definitely think it's a Blue Farm staple at this point. I'm really glad to see a lot of the pilots who play this list are definitely leaning towards making sure the One Ring earns its spot. Super light on lands for a Blue Farm list. Like, my goodness, 26 lands is so light. I think that's the least amount I've ever seen in Blue Farm. I think 27 was the lowest I saw before this, but like, wow. And this list definitely also running a few more of the like engine ones. Sidisi's Faithful, which I haven't seen in quite some time. Just you know, you can get it with your Ranger Captain. It's a 1 mana bounce spell, but it like gets around things like Deafening Silence and stuff like that, just because it is a creature bounce spell. So there's little intricacies about how like that works compared to other bounce spells in the format, but it's sorcery speed. But you know, you also once again have the intricacy of it being a creature and you can tutor it with things like Ranger Captain, which is pretty sweet. We have the Dan Brown here back with this wild pile list. Dan Brown really just saying like, hey, this is a list I'm going to keep repping at these tournaments, and you know, make a lot of top 16 cuts, made top 4 I believe at Cookout. So definitely making this wild pile list a known quantity. I think additions and changes from last time, there's no Elish Norn in the list any longer, but Hullbreaker Horrors being the top end of the deck. You know, there was a while when Wild Pile was definitely like Rebel's sort of child, right? But this is clearly like Dan Brown's here saying like, yeah, no, this is kind of my list going forward. It's got a lot of really cool stuff. I think is it running Devoted Druid too? Yeah, so Devoted Druid here comboing with not only Swift Reconfiguration here in the enchantment swap, but also with Machine God's Effigy, which is a combo I've been talking about with a lot of Kinnan players. But it's very, very cool. Basically, Machine Gods comes down. It's a Devoted Druid that can tap for green or for blue and goes infinite that way, which is pretty solid. And also allows you to do the combo with haste, which is pretty nice. And then, Freed from the Real, also working with your Bloom Tenders and technically your Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl and your Faber Elders. So a lot of combos that kind of work out that way. You have your classic Emil Dockside stuff. It's basically like if you threw a few more combos and also a few more just chunky boys in Dawnwaker, and that's kind of what this list is. It's definitely, I've noticed a lot more of the spicy cards have left the list as time has gone on, and now it's just like a lot of the, cards that are a lot of value and a higher mana value, right? But like not, nothing that's like insane, right? Like a lot of this stuff is actually starting to become like more realistic with how much can be cast. The big thing is like Hullbreaker Horror here, right? But like Hullbreaker Horror is just straight up a win con, and Thrasios allows you to play all the best Hullbreaker payoffs, right? So I like that this list is becoming just a lot more like clean and concise. This list is also, are they running the breach lines with Ephemerate? No, they're not. They're running Ephemerate and Spellseeker, but no breach lines with it, which is really interesting. I'm wondering, what's the Ephemerate inclusion for, Dan Brown? I would love to hear a little bit about that. That's pretty sweet if you want to comment on this video. If anyone else knows also, just feel free to throw it down in the comments below. I do find it very funny, though, that this list is slowly just basically like I've made my personal Dawnwaker list a little bit more explosive, and this list feels like it's also narrowing down a little bit to the point where like Wildpile and Dawnwaker are gonna start like looking really, really similar, which is very funny to me. So, interested to see how these decks progress, and if eventually this is just a merge of like, okay, these decks are like 5 or 6 cards off each other. Immediately, one of the spiciest decks in this tournament is Prosh. Speaking of 2016 Magic, my goodness, we haven't seen this commander in a very, 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 very long time. Basically since cEDH tournaments were kind of a real thing. This used to be like a boogeyman of the format, and now we're seeing it here just in this Mox Masters Top 16 by Tuca, one of our famous tie-in pilots nonetheless, here with this very, very cool spicy Prosh build. For those who don't know, Prosh was like the OG Jund win condition, right? It's the idea is you get Food Chain. You're able to cast Prosh infinitely with Food Chain because the way Prosh is worded, it will always like produce more mana than it costs when you start Food Chain comboing with it. And then you have enablers like Goblin Bombardment and Earthcraft and Phyrexian Altar and, several others here. And, we can probably go up to the creature slot with the card. I was looking at Sanguinary Priest and Mayhem Devil and Goblin Sharpshooter and the Standard Bearer. All of these different cards are different ways that you can get your commander and then start just going infinite and turning that infinite Food Chain, the infinite cast, into now I win the game. This list is also playing Dockside, and I don't know, is there a way, I guess, oh yeah, I see we have another way here. This list is so interesting to me. There's so many different ways to like create a bunch of stuff, sacrifice a bunch of different stuff. There's a Ruthless Technomancer here, which I'm wondering if there's any combos with Technomancer. None that I'm aware of, but that doesn't mean that there aren't any combos with Technomancer. A lot of really cool sacrifice stuff here. I'm not seeing any combos here with Dockside. Veteran Explorer here, also a really interesting card. Not one that seen a lot of play traditionally in cEDH. Definitely like a fringe legacy staple, right? But not a cEDH card often associated with the format. This deck's definitely running a lot of cool stuff. We have Docent the Falling Leaf as their version of basically Grand Abolisher in this list, which I always appreciate in any sort of proactive green deck. The deck's definitely running some cool stuff on Meltdown too, to be able to hate on some of the artifacts in the format. It's another Besiege for the Mirror deck. But yeah, definitely quirky, cool deck. Rampage of the Clans, also another one, very interesting. Not one that's traditionally played a lot in the format. Oh, we have Corpse Dance here. So I guess that goes infinite with Dockside and a sack outlet. That's pretty interesting. But there's not like a ton of traditional sack outlets in the deck, but there's definitely some quirkier ones up here, like Yawgmoth being one of them, definitely. And Thermopod too. Huh. This list is a lot of really cool stuff. There's a lot of weird stuff. Oh, and Goblin Bombardment, obviously I talked about that earlier too, and the Altar. So yeah, a lot of really crazy sacrifice synergies, a lot of weird stuff with that. There's Cryptolith, right, and Earthcraft to be able to like turn these combos into like just straight up outlets. And yeah, this is a pretty sweet list, and it's kind of crazy that Prosh is sort of coming back from the grave here. It's definitely a deck that not a lot of people are talking about because it's kind of not been a thing for a really long time. But here we are with Prosh making top 16 of this tournament. definitely would love to hear more about that. Tuka, if you're watching this video, I'd love to just tell me about it. It looks so cool. Dami Mommies by Easy Master, the name taken from the original Tim Jessica primer by Helenium. We got a classic. Let's see how many lands we got here. We're down to 23. Yep, 23 land Tim Jessica. You know, really making Rogsai sweat their 24th land here. But yeah, Tim Jessica has been, you know, it's Rogsai and Tim Jessica for the, you know, full beep decks of the format, going all in, full turbo, just trying to jam this stuff as quickly as possible. This one playing way more infinite mana outlets than traditional Tim Jessica stuff, which I actually really appreciate. I think it's been a little light on that strategy. I feel like a lot of them have been a little more heavy into the just playing Turbo Nas, but this one's on Auriok LED, on World Gorger lines, on Adel Adrian lines, right? We have all of our ways to reanimate those to make infinite mana, either, you know, with the Mana Rocks and Animate Dead, Dance of the Dead, Necromancy. Get one of either Abdel or World Gorger in your graveyard, be able to make infinite mana from there. Then we also have Bolus of Citadel here to make a bunch of mana, do stuff like that. We have Dockside combos with Cloudstone, Curio, and then are we on Magda as well? I assume as much. Yeah, Magda. And then like these creature counts are, you know, pretty decent. There's a lot of 1 and 2 drops here, which are great for farming card advantage with Tymna. They're also great there for just, you know, getting early advantage down. Things like Star Ascendant, putting life to a little pressure on your opponents. Esper Sentinel drawing cards, Ragavan getting card advantage. And then, you know, you got your classic bears here in the Mardu colors. You know, we are blueless. We are without Tymna, but we are still going very, very fast. You know, once again, it is a very lean, low to the ground deck and tries to press its advantage as much as it can. Definitely a lot of crazy higher mana values in a deck that is very proactive, right? We have 4 drops here. We have 6, 4, you know, back up to the reanimation targets. We got a 6, a 5, a 4, right? So a lot of heavy stuff here in this list, but I'm guaranteeing if I go down here to the mana value of the deck, yeah, 1.38 with Ad Nauseam still, which is still very solid for a deck that is so light on lands and so heavy on high CMC permanents. But congrats to our pilot here, Easy Master, and this is a deck we're going to keep seeing. I think it's pretty sweet, and I do really appreciate that this version of the deck is just jamming it full of infinite mana wins. Our next 3 decks in a row, which I find very interesting, that these are not just 3 of the same decks, but 3 decks in a row are all Kinnan decks, which is pretty interesting to me. So first of these, we have Wounded Satellites, Grind Them into Dust. Wounded Satellite, a name you should be familiar with. Kinnan has one of the longest streaks of any player playing one deck right now. Kinnan absolutely crushing it, and Wounded obviously putting up a lot of great results here in these online tournaments. And as I mentioned last week, first in-person tournament, top 16 and top 4 was last week, but now we are seeing back here again in the top 16 with their Grind Them into Dust list. Not a lot of changes from last week, very similar to what he's been playing, but definitely the same old list, doing the same old stuff. It's really interesting. And as I mentioned, we got 2 other Kinnan decks to look at right in a row here. So places number 7, 8, and 9 in this tournament. We have Twang, Giovanni, whose name I'm not sure I'm familiar with. Oh, Broken Necks. Okay, I've heard of them before as well. And Wounded. All here with these Kinnan lists. I figure the best thing to do is just to start comparing them to one another. So we have a pretty significant 11 differences here between our 9th and 8th place players. We have Broken Necks with some different land choices here. Both our 8th and 9th place decks are on Perplexing Chimera. We have our 8th place deck here with Coma and Terastodon and Jin Gataxia's Progress Tyrant as sort of our top end payoffs, and running Summoner's Pact as a quick way to be able to go get one of their important creatures, whereas Satellites here on Karn and Fabricate and a few cards like that. And might as well compare it to our 7th place list here. We're going to compare our 7th and 9th place lists, and we have compared to Twang's list here with about 20 cards different. And Twang naming their deck Rest in Peace Sheldon, in reference to the fact that we recently lost Sheldon Menery, the godfather of Commander, who was not only like the face of the rules committee, but a very influential person in just the creation of Commander and this format that we all enjoy and love. So very nice of Twang to memorialize them with the deck name in this tournament here. The differences here between these lists, we talked about Machine God's Effigy, Devoted Druid, Twang playing that as their one of their combos in the list. Aboleth Spawn, another card that I do not hear a ton of. It says whenever a creature enters the battlefield and opponent's control, it causes a triggered ability that creature trigger. You copy that ability, you may choose new targets. So basically you flash it in, you copy people's Dockside, you copy people's Thassa's Oracle, other ETBs. Really interesting piece here, and I know it was like one of those cards that people talked about during spoiler seasons, but then it saw literally 0 play. So very interested to see that in this list here. Twang also on Freed from the Real combos in the Kinnan list, which is something people have talked about for a while, but not traditionally played. played. Also interested to see Spellseeker here. Not really sure why that's in this version of the deck, especially because you can't really hit it off of Kinnan, but it's an interesting inclusion nonetheless. And Fairy Mastermind, which was talked about a lot early in Kinnan, but then Orcish Bowmasters sort of yeeted that card out of the format. So very interested to see it see play here. All right, with 3 Kinnans out of the way, we are on to number 6, Let Me Cook by Adatari. But before we talk about this deck, I know I mentioned earlier, we were talking about a new type of cEDH coaching. So in this channel, we have done traditional coaching, which is sort of like one-on-one Discord sessions with folks to sort of go over the areas they want to improve, either talking about decks, what areas they want to move through the metagame, decks choices before tournaments, and things like that. That has been the traditional type of coaching session that I've done here for the channel. However, we're also adding now gameplay coaching. So what's going to be happening is we'll be chunking out 2-hour blocks. And if people are interested, it will be myself and 3 people who are interested in receiving this type of coaching. Basically, the idea is that we'll chunk out 2 hours, just play as many cEDH games as we can during those 2 hours for a rate of $30 an hour, which is obviously the current rate, and that might change over time. And then as the games wrap up, we'll take about 10 minutes, talk about what happened in the game, any interesting plays, things like that. And that will happen for about 2 hours. And then if people are still interested in diving deeper into those games, they can also book a separate coaching session with me at a rate that would be cheaper than a normal coaching session to go over the things we play in that game. So if people are interested in that, please hit me up in my DMs, either through my email, comedianmtg@gmail.com, Discord, or Twitter. I'm really excited about this new type of coaching. I know people have talked about getting in games with me and learning in those games for quite some time, and I think this is a really good opportunity to do that. It's definitely going to be a process of like making sure we can get a 2-hour chunk where multiple people are able to jump in and play these games. But I think it's going to be a really good process. So, and once again, email me, Discord, Twitter, all those places if you're interested in doing some cEDH gameplay coaching. And also, once again, a reminder that we do traditional coaching, as I mentioned, Discord calls, talking about decks, talking about meta games, talking about deck choices, going over mulligans, things like that, and strategy to get you to that next step of the game. Without any further ado, let's jump back in at Let Me Cook by Adatari. Rocco, Cabaret Caterer. Good to see that make a top 16 again, because that deck was one of the most consistent top 16 decks for like 3 months, and then just boom, vanished, disappeared completely, out of here, right? This is the first one to make a top cut in a really long time. It's, running the classic Rocco stuff, though. This one going for the Vivian lines, right? So if you get an Arena Rector onto the battlefield, you sacrifice it, then you can have your Vivian come down and immediately start plussing on Rocco to assemble a Kiki Jiki combo. It is also able to combo off with Dockside Extortionist. This version does not seem to be running Collector Oof. I know there's always like a weird debate with these Rocco lists about whether they actually include Collector Oof, because they do run Dockside combos, but they also have a bit of awkwardness with, wanting artifacts and wanting to stop opponents from having artifacts. This list definitely running a lot of mana enablers. Got Lumberjack, Priest of Titania, and all the standard ones. Got Faber Elder, Philaji Wayfarer, another one. I think like I've seen it once in a Rocco list, and then I talked about how cool it was and how interesting it was, and then I never saw it again. So just giving your commander Convoke is a really quick way to enable several sorry, we have a kitten interruption. Giving Rocco Convoke is a quick way to ensure that it is something that can be cast multiple times. Hi, Miri. I think that's Miri's first appearance on the channel. Anyways, but yeah, Rocco can definitely be cast significantly easier when he has Convoke. We also are talking about the fact that this is a food chain commander, right? So Squee the Immortal is the outlet of choice here, right? You get food chain, you get Squee, and then you can start casting Rocco over and over again to pull out your win conditions from the deck, usually ending in a Kiki Jiki line. I'm really happy to see Rocco do well. It's a deck that I've always really liked. I thought it was super cool, and then just like boom, vanished out of the ethos, out of the conversation, just completely gone. So happy to see it play again, and it's a deck that I honestly kind of like forgot about for a while, and it's a Kiki Jiki deck, so like maybe I sleeve it up sometime soon. I have Devrick here with Wet Mardu. I don't know why that name really got me. It reminds me of Jeskai Black, way back in Standard. But yeah, Wet Mardu, also known as Blue Farm. This is a pretty classic Blue Farm list. Nothing too insane here. Not even running the new Beseech the Mirror, which I think is correct for most Blue Farm decks. Definitely a 14 artifacts here. No One Ring in this Wet Mardu list. No Talion either. I'm really kind of disappointed. I thought Talion would be sort of this like auto slap into Blue Farm, and none of the Blue Farm decks that I've seen this weekend were playing it. And this one not even playing the One Ring, which has made me sad, because if you're gonna play a deck like Blue Farm, like maybe at least include some cool new cards. Sorry to be a hater. But anyways, yeah, I don't know. It's Blue Farm. Congrats to Devrick on at least giving Blue Farm a fun name so that I could do a chuckle here on the channel. But yeah, doing Blue Farm stuff, you know, obviously the best performing mid-range deck in the format, I can say, maybe, if you don't count Kinnan, that's a creature combo deck. Sure, that feels like a take I can stake right in there. So yeah, congrats to our player here for the top 5, my bad. Before we go any further, Lotus Con is coming up October 7th and 8th in Belleville, Illinois. It's getting real close, folks. We are almost at this this event. It's going to be a major cEDH event. The first one Monarch has back on the calendar. I've heard they got a lot of stuff lined up for 2024, and I'm super happy to talk about that. But first, we're going to have Lotus Con event. Now, reminder, Monarch Media is going to be running the cEDH tournament aspect of this Mythic Lotus Gaming Monarch collaboration. But there's also an entire other part of this convention that is run by Mythic Lotus Gaming, which is going to be pretty sweet. But yeah, the tournament itself run by Monarch. If you have any details, all the links are down in the description below. Any questions on that? Also, speaking of events I'm going to be going to, this one is coming up real soon. I just got invited to this tournament and I'm really excited about it. I have not been to a tournament in Texas yet. So I was talking with the TOs of this event and they were like, yeah, hey, a lot of these events tend to be pretty coastal. We have our West Coast events, which are unfortunately starting to lose a bit of attendance. And we have a lot of these East Coast events, which are a lot of these popular cEDH tournaments. But here we have Commander Challenge 9, which I admit is not the sexiest name. It does not roll off the tongue very well, but it's going to be a pretty sweet event with a literal time twister as the first place prize. And this tournament is going to be happening at the end of the month. Can't really see it here. Sorry, my microphone's in the way. But September 30th in Mesquite, Texas. This is a $12K prize support tournament. This is going to be crazy. As I mentioned, $12,000 in prizing. Time twister to first place, going all the way down. It's got a bit of a crazy format, but they were trying to make this an annual thing. And just kind of hoping people show up for this thing. It's going to be looking pretty sweet. It's definitely got some rules that are a little atypical for some cEDH tournaments, and the information for that you can find. I'll leave a link for this down in the description of this video, and I'm going to be there. I'm excited to meet people, and I'm excited to see people who are in like the southern Texas area who I don't get to see a lot for a lot of cEDH tournaments and who don't get to travel as much to the coast. So yeah, come check it out if you're in the area, and if you're thinking about traveling down for this, it sounds like the prizing's pretty worth it. So I definitely come check it out. And also, admission includes a Saturday badge to Anime North, Texas, right? So that not only is this just like a cEDH tournament thing, like you also just get to be there for Anime North that happens to be in Texas at the time. This is literally a cEDH tournament in this major anime convention. So it's like, I don't know, it's kind of a cool win-win situation. I'm going to be there. Once again, that's the end of this month, September 30th. Be there, be square. I don't know what to tell you. Into our top 4, we have cEDH Super Friends cEDH by Baneslayer88. I believe this is a name I have talked about with cEDH before. Yeah, this is a cEDH Super Friends list. A cEDH, Aminatou, Nicol Bolas, doing the chain kind of thing. One of my favorite decks to be playing nowadays. This list sort of reminds me of some hybrid between what Malcolm and I have been playing lately. Definitely not playing like some of Malcolm's cards with like the 2 mana value, but playing a few more of the cards he's playing some of the cards that I'm playing. Agatha's Soul Cauldron being an amazing new pickup for cEDH lists. It's such a boon for this deck, and I'm super happy to play it. I didn't really get to see it a ton when I was playing in Columbus, but the card is insane, and like just talking with other cEDH pilots about how many things that opens up is like so crazy. I'm really just in love with cEDH right now. It's been such a fun deck. The gold fishing thing is like so fun to play with it, and it's a really cool deck that when you learn the lines, you feel awesome. Like it feels so cool to be able to assemble a win through, you know, counting your mana, doing stuff like that. And then it has like a lot of really cool pivot stuff. This list, as I mentioned, running a bunch of like solid staples, running Urtai and Sakshima, which were definitely, Sakshima is one of my flex slots for a long time, but I moved away from it in Urtai. I know it's one of the Malcolm's really high on, and I know it's like a Thoracle sniper for stuff like that, being able to activate cEDH and like punish your opponents. It's not a card I love, but I get its inclusion. Bowmasters, also not one that I love in cEDH, but I totally, you know, it's definitely still a solid option, very good at controlling the board, and Luris, definitely good at recurring value for this deck. All these legends that have these double pips like Catilda and Kinnan and Lavinia, Lotho, Niambi, Derevi, Luris, like all of these multiple color pips are so important for the cEDH plan. Also, honestly, Brazen for playing Delighted Halfling. I think it's so bad in the deck, and it's great for like casting your legendary creatures, but like it doesn't even help you activate Sisay, and it's not one that I'm a big fan of. But yeah, congrats to our top 4 player here for Sisay. As I mentioned, it's been a really awesome deck to play lately, and it's one that makes me really happy. It's just fun. I mean, you get to play Planeswalkers in cEDH, which is not something I was ever expecting to do, which was sad because it's my favorite card type. But you know, here we are, and Sisay making top 4s. Blues Clues SNC by Silent E. We have a Lucas Will Luris deck? Not a Luris deck. Okay. So this is a baby blue farm list that is not playing Luris. I think we may have covered this list before, or a similar list. But normally a lot of the Will and Lucas combinations will play Luris because they can keep the mana value pretty low because these commanders are 4-color combinations of such. But this list playing cards like Baron and Braids and Mayhem Devil, Oppo, you know, all of these higher than 3 CMC or higher than 2 CMC permanents. So it's pretty sweet. Definitely excited to always see, like, you know, if people are going to be playing the Sans green space, right? Not just seeing Tim Necrom over and over again. The deck does do a lot of similar stuff. Will also like a very decent Beseech the Meteor, you know, enabler, right? Getting clues down pretty early. But yeah, this list definitely, like, you get the benefits of sort of Rograk in a sense with this deck, right? Where it's not as quick as Rograk, right? But you get your Mox Ambers turned online really early. You get your Springleaf Drums turned online really early, which is nice because Blue Farm tends to struggle in, you know, getting the ability to, like, well, Blue Farm is just in general slower than this version of the deck because this version of the deck gets to have more fast mana, right? And Blue Farm tends to be a little more mid-range control-y, whereas this list does not nearly grind as well, right? But it's sort of like not quite 4-color Rograk, but it's comparable, and it also has technically an infinite outlet with Cloudstone Curio and Baron being able to recast Will over and over again and draw your deck. So definitely a pretty solid list, and really cool to see this take on a deck that is not as traditionally played. And I'm wondering, are they running? They are running Ephemerate lines here. So for those who don't know, Ephemerate plus Spellseeker means that you can play Spellseeker, Ephemerate it, and you go through a line where basically you go get Final Fortune, upkeep, you get Enlightened Tutor, and then you Brain Freeze, and you get Underworld Breach, and all blah, 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 blah. You get to do the thing. So yeah, this is a deck that is able to win and treat Spellseeker kind of like an Ala as a 1-card combo. So yeah, it's pretty cool, pretty solid. I do like seeing this combo see play. As I mentioned, just cool to see a little bit difference from what we're used to seeing here in the format, and you know, in the Sans green space, a little bit of variety, a little bit of coolness. I'm very impressed by this next list called Is It a Pirate by Samurai Dancer. We have Malcolm Kedis, which is really cool. I didn't really think that was a list that people were going to be playing after I took it to Chaos recently, but very surprised. And this list definitely has like a healthy amount of differences than what I was playing. This list kind of going closer to the version that was played quite some time ago. This one playing way more of the piracy hack combo. So things like Trickery Charm and like Artificial Evolution, playing Maskwood Nexus and Arcane Adaptation. So like dozens, and by that I mean 4 ways to turn all of your creatures into pirates, and or one specific creature into pirates. And then with all of these ways to combo, we have Reckless Fireweaver, Glenhorn Buccaneer, which is already a pirate, but Hedron Detonator, Ingenious Artillerist. So all of these different ways to be able to start pinging your opponents, and then with Malcolm on the battlefield, you go, oh, hey, make a treasure, ping your opponent, make a treasure, ping your opponent, make a treasure, ping your opponent, boom, infinite damage, infinite treasures. And yeah, killing your opponents that way is pretty sweet. So this list definitely has a lot of similarities to the one I was running at that Chaos tournament, with running the Niv Mizzet, the Nezahal, Consecrated Sphinx as sort of the big mana payoffs, being able to have Gedis right for that reason. Tezzeret going to grab your 1 ring, gain advantage this way. This list also running more wheels than I was running in that list. Definitely a little bit more into that strategy, and also playing breach lines, which I tend to not enjoy in this strategy as much. But this one's also, you know, just a little bit more explosive. So definitely a definitely unique take on this archetype, definitely different than what I brought to the most recent Chaos. You know, 2 Malcolm Kedis is doing well in the past few months. I'm genuinely pleasantly surprised. I thought the deck was a little bit more silly than it is, but seeing it get second place at this tournament's pretty cool. And you know, Malcolm maybe potentially making a comeback after sort of being treated as a dead deck for a little bit makes me really happy. I kind of miss Malcolm in the format. It's been getting really badly clowned on by a lot of the other stuff that's happening. So really cool to see it not having that happen. The King's Kitten by PTD. PTD has been coming with this deck, putting in the reps and playing this Kenrith list over and over again, and finally walking away the real returned king, and taking down this tournament with this list. This is a mid-range style Kenrith list, playing Displacer Kitten and Lurrus. You know, they're kittens of choice, along with several different Docksides lines here with Deadeye Navigator and Emil. They're playing some Lurrus synergy, stuff like that. It's a lot of it is like this 5-color good stuff mid-range strategy, but also having lines with Spellseeker and Displacer Kitten, stuff like that. And, you know, a lot of just, hey, 5-color good stuff, outlet in the command zone. This list definitely not on Nas, way more mid-rangey than some other Kenrith lists we've seen. You know, other Kenriths have been sort of like 5-color Breya, whereas this list is much more of a, you know, mid-range grind list, like the original Kenrith Evolution stuff that Hire was playing way back in the day. So PTD has been putting in a lot of work with this deck and showing up to, I think, especially these Mox Masters tournaments, grinding with this list, playing it over and over again, and now putting up results with it. So, I mean, it's been putting up results, but this one definitely a very clean result. You know, I'm noticing the Dockside combos are the main outlet for the infinite mana in this deck, and obviously Displacer Kitten plus Teferi, also another win con in the list. Thoracle Consult, the classic, it's in there. And then it is running Breach lines, that is right. Are they running in? Yeah, they're Intuition as well, so definitely Breach, but once again more of a mid-range Breach, not the, you know, standard stuff we are used to seeing. But this list is it's pretty sweet, and the fact that we have our player here once again showing up with their list, putting in work, showing up, making reps, and Kenrith has been doing pretty well lately. We had a top 4 with it recently, you know, winning this tournament, and, you know, not just in the hands of our player here, but doing pretty decently. I think it's one of those decks that, like, people see it, they go, oh yeah, it's the 5-color soup deck, right? Whatever. But I don't think it gets hated as much as things like Najeela do in the current meta, and Najeela is getting a lot of ire because, to be honest, it was clowning on the format earlier in the year, and now it's sort of been falling off, and Kenrith maybe fighting Sisay for the title of what's the best 5-color deck in the format right now. It's a really interesting conversation, and yeah, it's really, really cool to see this deck do well. So congrats to BTD for, once again, taking a deck, putting in the work, showing up, and finally taking down a tournament with it. That is our top 16 from Mox Masters September 2023. Remember, everybody, while you're here on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. All of that stuff helps out the channel a ton. I don't know if y'all noticed, but I've been pushing out a lot of content lately for you. And that's only possible because of either people signing up for cEDH coaching or helping out over at patreon.com/comedianmtg. Every person who signs up helps a ton. I'm working on new tiers. I'm working on new ways to get content out for you all on this channel. So if you're all interested in helping out and making sure that this channel can continue growing to make sure that it can remain my main professional focus, head over to patreon.com/comedianmtg. And for everyone who's already supporting, I cannot express enough how grateful I am for all of you. Thank you so much, and catch y'all in the next video. Peace.